the Lead Generation World podcast. My name is Michael Furry. I'm your host. We got a great one today. I've got Scott Payne from SDP Solutions with us today. And this one's kind of close to my heart because I was once a mortgage lead buyer, and this was a little while ago. But one of the challenges was around the processes of distribution of where leads should go and what should be done once you receive a lead. And Scott is, no question, an expert in this field. So we're going to talk a lot about distribution of leads. And frankly, it doesn't matter if it's a mortgage lead, solar lead, education, debt, you name it. These principles apply across any vertical. And what's cool is Scott's also going to be speaking at Lead Generation World in January, and he kind of talks a little bit about what he's going to be speaking on then too, so you'll want to check that out. I want to first thank our sponsors. Thank you to Digital Media Solutions and Lending Tree for being really, really great supporters of Lead Generation World, the event, and the podcast. Thank you for all the sponsors that really support the show as well. If you're not registered, I always got to tell you, hit up the website soon. Registration right now is $395. As I always say, you can't beat it. So don't forget to register soon. You can go to leadgenerationworld.com and handle that today. That'd be super awesome. But let's dive in. One other thing I want to tell you with regards to Lead Generation World. We got a ton of really great content. Like I said, Scott's going to be speaking at in the mortgage track. But if you're a buyer, of leads across any vertical, we really do have a lot of great sessions for you. So make sure to check out the agenda as well. But okay, enough plugging. Let's get into our interview today with Scott Payne. All right, everybody. Welcome to Lead Generation World Podcast. My name is Michael Furry. We've got Scott Payne here from SDP Solutions to talk about all kinds of things, lead management and sales enablement and all kinds of good stuff. So I want to welcome Scott to the show. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, Mike. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good. Thanks for joining me. Funny story. We've actually done this interview already once before, but I didn't hit the record button. So we're going to do it all over again, which is great because frankly, we could have probably talked for a whole additional hour longer than we did the other time too. So we'll try to cover some of the same stuff and then dive into maybe some new stuff.
Find some new stuff, I'm sure. Yeah, all good. Yeah. Let's do it.
So before we get in, although I know you quite well now, tell us a little bit about SDP Solutions. And actually, you know what? Let me do this because I did notice, you've got a ton of history with on the buy side of the mortgage table, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And before we get into SDP Solutions, I think it makes sense to sort of talk a little bit about your history there. So out of college, you became a loan officer, and then what?
Yeah, so that was back in 2004. And as we mentioned on the previous one, I had a political science degree. So of course I went into to become a loan officer from that degree. So, but yeah, graduated from college and started on a lending tree team. Essentially, I was a loan officer that was on essentially a prime team, if you will, because I was part of Syntex Home Equity at the time, which eventually became Nationstar, which eventually became Mr. Cooper. But I was on a team that was specific to lending tree leads that were, higher FICO type leads, and originating them using Fannie Mae guidelines as a subprime company, which, maybe we'll get into a little bit later as to how that all worked out, I think, for Nationstar. But ultimately, we had our DU findings, we had all the different stuff we had to do, but ultimately had subprime overlays on top. It was a super difficult lead source as it was, just because it was so competitive at the time. And here we are coming in. So I really had to learn how to sell really quickly. And then, in doing that, it really kind of set the stage for my career, I believe, because I really started to learn more about, leads in general. A lot of times, at least people that started the company at the time were getting, current customer retention leads because we had a portfolio at the time. And here I am doing new business lending tree leads. And so I really had to understand the lead sources and where they were coming from and the different filters we were buying from so that I could, perform as best as possible.
Yeah.
So that ultimately led to, I got promoted about a year and a half into a management and training program that we called MIT, where, the people who had started this, the foresight they had to like really figure out that this would be an impactful way to grow a manager. They would pull us off the floor and put us into a 6-month training program. So essentially, the first month you spend as an actual processor. So like you leave your desk as a salesperson, you go sit with a processing team, and they gave me a pipeline of loans to process, right? And so now I'm learning how to process a file and really understanding the day in a life of a processor, so that when I become a manager, I'm putting together more cleaner files because I know what they're looking for and I understand that process. It was so impactful. Then I spent a month as an underwriter, like literally underwriting files, had a whole pipeline and understand what the underwriter is going through, and did it for 30 full days, an entire month. And then the last 30 days of that was spent in kind of a just a various departments. So some people went to finance, some people went to HR, and I was fortunate enough to go to marketing. And for 30 days, I was in charge of lead distribution for our call centers, also for our retail branches. So our retail branches at the time, we were buying them 1 to 2 leads per loan officer of like Lending Tree or other lead sources, and we were distributing those to those 95 branches. And I was in charge of distribution. They literally gave me the keys to the system and said, "Here's how you do it. You do it for 30 days." And it really gave me some insight into now understanding the lead sources, even down to I talked about the different filters, but really understanding how to analyze the data to understand like who converts what the best, and
Yeah.
really looking at the speed to lead and those types of things, because now I could control who was getting what. And if you were converting better, I wanted to give you more, and et
Yeah.
cetera. And I wanted to
Was
show and
was
maximize.
that sort of a manual process? I mean, when you put somebody in charge of lead distribution, the first thing that comes to my head is shooting off emails and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But that necessarily wasn't the case, right? I mean, you guys had a system in place, but
Yeah.
what were the things that you were looking at back then, going when it came to deciding who's going to get what leads and so forth?
Yeah, well, we were fortunate at the time. We had a really good a technology team who had built a lead management system proprietary for Syntax Nation, slash Nationstar at the time. And so this tool gave us the ability to write caps and distribution rules and some key things that were important to when you're trying to distribute to that many people. At the time, it was like 700 loan officers, and trying to really maximize that. So we had a tool, really good reporting based on that. We had a lot of insight into the type of lead, based on some marketing hierarchy we had built into the system that really allowed us to like drill down to what specific filter is converting the best with what people. And so yeah, it was a lot of fun. Got to know a lot of real good people at the time, and in dealing with there's, I think people probably experience this today when you have call center people versus a kind of boots on the ground type salesperson out in the field. And so really understanding that model really helped me as I grew my career, and eventually started to work for Velocify, which we'll get into, where I'm starting to work with where I started to work with a lot of larger banks who had that same type of model. It gave me a lot of insight later on in life. And so I did that for a month. It was an amazing experience. I then went and was an assistant manager for 3 months and ran like an assistant manager role. And then after that 3 months, got my own team and built a team of 15 loan officers in a call center in Louisville, Texas, and and training people and doing all of that. And then they had come to me and said, "Hey, remember that marketing role you did? Would you be interested in coming back and being like a middleman between sales and marketing?" And this is something I think is critical for the marketers out there who are working with sales teams today. And at least where I was, and I've seen it all over, is there's a lot of headbutting between the two, right? marketing always has an issue with sales. They didn't call it the right way. There's some great videos on YouTube. When you type in marketing sales, to go out and see, well, the marketers blaming sales, but then the sales blaming the lead source, and they're blaming marketing. They're not, buying the right type of lead. And so, I really believe that there needs to be like a marriage between sales and marketing. And the way to do that would be to have someone that sits in the middle of the two as kind of the liaison between marketing and sales. And so I got asked to come into this role where, marketing, if they had an issue with sales, they'd come to me. I'd vet it out. I'd make sure that it was legit concern. I would run analytics and maybe even adjust lead distribution at that point in time. In this role, eventually, what it was I was in charge of all lead distribution and all lead analytics. And so marketing would come to me. And when sales had issues with leads, I'd verify it, look into the data, really understand if that was an issue or not, and then take it to marketing. And so to have that kind of person in between, I think that's an important concept for a lot of people out there. I don't see a lot. I just see this kind of marketing on its own and sales
Sure.
on its own. And to have someone that's in the middle there that then is in charge of the lead distribution piece of it and
Yeah.
really optimizing there, I think was a critical piece that helped us be successful at Nationstar at the time.
How was that experience? Because I remember times when I was buying leads for a mortgage company as well, where one sales guy was going, you know what, these leads from XYZ, suck. I
Mm-hmm.
can't get a hold of me. They're horrible, blah, blah, blah. And I'll go, okay, I'll look into it, man. I'll go look at it. I go back into the data and they're like one of the better performing lead sources. And he's just
Right.
doing horrible with them for whatever reason. It could be not necessarily him. It could be just a random, thing. But how many times would you have those complaints come to you and then you go back and you find out that it's not necessarily the same, the marketing performance isn't really seeing the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was an everyday thing, right? It's this lead was bad. Send this lead back to the vendor. I'm sure a lot of the lead guys out there have heard this type of thing, and ultimately, what I ended up doing, and this has been a critical part of my career going forward into the Velocify days, and then also in starting SDP Solutions, is to provide a way that allows you to like secret shop yourself.
Yeah.
A lot of times you see secret shoppers and they're, they'll go in and actually like buy a product and secret shop it that way. Or maybe on the mortgage world, you've seen a secret shopper that will act like a borrower, have their credit pulled, get all the way to closing, whatever the case may be, and shop the process.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did was really kind of peeled back the lead experience side of it, right? Understanding like there's a lot of strategy that goes into building out a lead management system and really understanding how leads should be prioritized or distributed. But until you put a lead on your website or mimicked, a lead provider lead that comes in the system and understand, are the users actually following the things you have in place? Or are you inspecting kind of what you would expect? And so, I started to do that, just kind of, I'd put in my cell phone number and kind of track how many calls I would get. And I would put in my email address just to see, but ultimately they'd find out it was my cell phone or my email address. And so I got a little smart about it when I got into Velocify days, where I started to, I found a phone system where I could get phone numbers, and I found an email platform to get a bunch of different email addresses. And essentially it became a ongoing thing with my clients. Same things, same concept I was doing before, was to really understand what the experience was. How many calls do I get in 10 days? How many emails do I get? Do I get an email, a call when I open an email? If I respond to a text, what is the experience like? If the customer calls in and asks for a call back at a certain date and time, does the salesperson follow up on time? Interesting enough, I've done almost 300 of these like secret shops, if you will, or what I call a customer experience or lead experience screening. And 85% of the time, I don't get a call back after I've got a call. So if I schedule a call back for tomorrow and ask for someone to call me back,
Right.
60% of the time, I don't receive a call back at least on time. It's crazy the missed opportunity there.
Yeah.
85% of the time, I don't receive an additional call. So they do call me on time. I don't receive any other phone calls after that. It's unbelievable the amount of missed opportunity that's there. Salespeople are so focused on the next newest lead that once you've got someone on the phone, wasn't able to convert them now, they're not going back and calling those. And that's really one of the main missions of SDP Solutions, is to help lenders, to help universities, whoever it may be, who are purchasing leads and spending a ton of money and investing all this money and time on these leads they're purchasing, to not, let them fall through the cracks. And so putting things in place for these organizations so that, if someone doesn't follow up, to have some type of way for them to get the lead back to somebody else who will. I was on the call with 2 lenders this morning trying to solve the exact same thing. We have people not following up with their callback leads. And I'm like, this is such a missed opportunity, because now, the phone number is good. There's a borrower who was actually interested in talking to you the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
It's an amazing opportunity, and people let it fall through the cracks all the time. So,
Have you pinpointed the reason why the callbacks just don't happen? I mean, granted, okay, we know that, like you said, that sales guys are just potentially focused on that next great lead, that one call close kind of thing.
yeah.
But to your point, I mean, these are people that are interested. This is the best lead you're going to have that day, to
Right.
call somebody back. Is it the process that's broken?
I think it's a little bit of both. There's a lot of people who get stuck in their own old ways. So they'll, put it on a Post-it note here, right? Where there's the camera, put on a Post-it note, or I'll put it in my calendar, and I forget about it. And
Yeah.
then there's no prioritization of that after the fact. And so, some of the lead management systems, especially one that I know well, Velocify has the ability to do things like a scheduled dial. So you could say, hey, at 1:00 tomorrow, I want the system to call me, the salesperson. And when I pick up my phone, then the call goes out to the consumer, and I'm calling them back on time. And that looks great from a consumer standpoint. When I answer a call back at 1 and my phone rings at 1:00, it's an amazing experience.
Yep.
But then it comes to the follow-up part of it, right? So now the user has to then go reschedule a calendar event each time they're doing this. Now, is it that hard? Probably not. But at the end of the day, they have so much going on. It's difficult. And so it's putting things in place. Like in Velocify, I work a lot on prioritization. So to move the callbacks up further in the funnel, at the more the top of the list, versus, I think a lead that you've made contact with, you've got to have a quick conversation that asks you to call you back. I believe that's more important than a lead you've called one time. It's maybe even more important than maybe even a new lead, because at least you have them on the phone right now and you've got some type of a commitment for a callback. But what I find most of the time is that lenders are putting those further down in the
Just get buried.
prioritization,
Yeah.
because they're so focused on contacting leads and getting a good contact rate, but they get buried down below, so there's not followed up. And so it's just a problem that we continue to see. But I'm working with a number of lenders on rethinking that strategy. Maybe it's not that it stays in that salesperson's queue, right? A lot of times a salesperson thinks, well, this is my lead. Well, really, it's the company's lead. It's not really your lead. And so, how can we build a strategy around that? If you miss your callback time, where you don't make it on time, that we pull it back and give it to, to a call screener team that you may have internally, to allow them to make the call. And then at that point, to transfer it back to that salesperson. And if they're not available, send it to somebody else. But
Yeah.
ultimately, to give the customer a great experience, and really, cut out those missed opportunities that are out there today.
One of the big things, I think a lot of companies and lenders sort of debate on implementing is that call screener process. Do they have the guys, whether it's even outsourced to a third party or it's internally, that's just smiling and dialing and getting people on the phone, doing a quick pre-qual and then transferring it over to a loan officer for sales. I see that being tested a lot, with some success and some not. Is that what's your thought on that whole process? Is that sort of the way to go to be most efficient?
It's one of my top recommendations that I make to organizations today, and actually it kind of leads me into the topic for lead generation world that I'll be speaking on, which is lead management 2.0, rewiring your process around the modern salesperson. And the modern salesperson, in my eyes, in my experience of being, I've been one, so I feel like I know what they're up against day to day. I've managed them as a sales manager, and then I was VP of marketing, where I was, managing the lead distribution to salespeople. And so I've seen them evolve over time. And back in my day, right, like quote unquote, back in my day, we used to walk up the hill both ways, but
Yeah.
in all seriousness, I mean, back in my day, we were driven to make 100 outbound calls per day. I didn't go home unless I made 100 outbound calls a day. And that was kind of the mentality then. And I don't see that anymore. I don't see the dialing for dollars. I don't see the, hey, I'm going to make a ton of phone calls today. Salespeople today have gotten to a point now with technology that maybe they don't have to make 100 calls per day. And so they've kind of gotten out of it. But you, the lender, you, the university, whoever it may be, you're buying these leads and you need them called. So who's going to do it? And
Yeah.
ultimately, that's where I think it comes into play, is that you're going to have a screener that is calling the person on the consistent time, because they're just pressing a button that says, give me the next lead. There's no ownership for a screener. There's no prioritization. They're just clicking a button. It runs through its little distribution prioritization that takes the next best lead and gives it to them for the outbound call, right? And what we find when putting these things in place is that if you put a strategy in place that says, I want a lead called right away, an hour later, 6 hours later, it will get followed when using this model. Now, the other key piece that people need to consider with this is that there is a transfer that needs to take place that gets it over back to the salesperson. And what I found in my experience when using a third party, or even using a dialer, let's say, that's not really tightly integrated with your system, is that you have to place the customer on hold. You get them on the phone, get them excited. Okay, great. Let me get you over to someone and put them on hold. And
Right.
sometimes that can take up to a minute, minute and a half to get them over to a salesperson. Abandonment rate happens. People are dropping off. It's a poor customer experience, in my opinion, to ever be put on hold. And so one of the solutions that I'm working with a lot of lenders on is a solution that's actually available in Velocify called a no-hold transfer. And what a no-hold transfer does is a screener in this case is able to press a button to start the distribution, to then notify salespeople they're about to have a transfer on the line.
Oh.
The salesperson wins the lead, right? And now they are put on hold. The salesperson is the one waiting for the 20, 30 seconds, whatever the case is. And what's interesting about this is that now they're able to preview the lead in their system. They're able to see like who they're about to get. So they're a little educated on that. It notifies the screener that Scott is waiting on hold, Scott, the salesperson. And then they bring Scott in on the phone call. And the borrower never knew that this was going on in the background. And now you're getting a customer directly back to a salesperson immediately without ever going and hearing hold music. And so I believe that if you're able to do that, and you're able to get calls made on time, and you're able to get the callbacks kind of through this process as well, that you can be super successful with the modern salesperson, because now, they're able, with this technology advancement, they're now able to, take more, inbound calls. You love inbound calls that have been pre-screened with the customer ready to go. And you're able to provide them now this lead already on a silver platter. Here they're ready to go. They've had a great experience. They didn't know they're being transferred. Now they're being transferred, and you can take it and run with it. So, I'll be talking a lot about that during the session, strategies around how to do that and how to implement that, because it's the number one thing that I recommend today.
Yeah. No, that sounds really great. I love that. That not hold
No hold
transfer.
transfer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool. So, just to be clear, if I have a consumer on the phone, I'm talking with them, I'm initiating a notification to the person, whoever is going to get it, round rob, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That loan officer gets a notification, sort of grabs a lead, clicks a button, somehow connects to the line,
Yeah. So
and
the
then on
way,
hold.
so if you're familiar with the old, the shotgun distributions that you probably
Yeah.
heard about with Velocify. So yeah, so we're creating a race, because now we have a borrower that's going to be a transfer here.
Yep.
We've created a race. The first person to pick up their phone and press one or clicks a button on the screen, their phone is going to ring, that salesperson. So the salesperson picks up and they hear hold music. And while they're on hold, they can preview. And it will be, by this point, they just need to make an introduction, bring the salesperson into the call. And so they're only waiting for 15 to 20 seconds. By the time, the loan officer or the salesperson is only on hold for a short period of time, but then they're brought in the call. And again, the borrower never even knew they were being transferred, and they can complete that transfer
Oh,
for
that's awesome. I think
it's a
that's going to
game
be,
changer.
that's huge. Yeah. And with the, so many companies doing hot transfers, I mean, they should all be doing that
Yeah,
same type of transfer to some
absolutely.
extent. Yeah.
Yep.
And I had a conversation with, Aru, Abanikar from
Mm-hmm.
Bot Splash, and she, with regards to texting, the same question was, do you put them in different groups? You have people sort of doing different things, and she had sort of the same
Yep.
opinion that, yeah, I mean, there's certain people that are going to be really great at messaging and texting and doing sort of this thing over here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, have them do that. And there's going to be great people that are going to be good closers, and salespeople, have them do that. And then have your out screeners and that sort of thing, making the dials. And
Yeah.
if you can have it so efficient where it's completely seamless for the consumer or the prospect, then, then you're in a great situation. But it's all those like cutoff and transfers that become a problem.
Yeah.
I
Well,
imagine.
and I would even add to that, because I did love that point from Aru, is that if you can focus on find the people who are really good with messaging. And I'll give you an example. I'm working with another client today and saw some of their text messages that their salespeople are sending. And some people just are not good with drafting a text message, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be spelling or punctuation and those types of things. So if you can find a good group of people who understand maybe SMS etiquette, if you will, and those are the people who can handle your SMS outbound messages until you get them on the phone and transfer them over. I would also say that having this type of specialization helps as well, because a lot of people today, when you're hiring a new salesperson, the first place you usually think is someone who's coming out of college, right? So if you're hiring a salesperson, and we're almost in the year 2020, and I'm hiring, let's say, a 23-year-old, right? So they were 2007 was the first year, I believe it was 2007 was the first year that Americans sent more text messages than they made phone calls. So that's when kind of the shift happened of, I'm going to send you a text rather than making a phone call. So this 23-year-old was 10 years old in 2007. If you're hiring them in 2020, 10 years old, right? So they grew up in this, and this is maybe around the same time they were getting their first phone, right? 11, 12 years old. And here they are, not making phone calls anymore. They're sending text messages, right? That's kind of how they've grown up. And so you hire them into an organization if you don't have the screener model in place, and you say, here's a phone, go make 100 calls a day. And they're like, what is a phone?
What?
Like, what is a
Yeah.
landline? Like, I would bet some people you're hiring today, have never even made a call on a landline in some cases. I mean, it's so rare nowadays to make a call. And here you give them a landline and say, make 100 calls.
I don't even think my kids have ever had a landline in their home. I mean, I've got a 16-year-old, and maybe we had one at one point, but no idea.
I have a desk phone right here to my left, and my son came in to call my brother-in-law the other day, and he was trying to figure out how to make it work. It was hilarious to watch. And there's all kinds of funny videos on YouTube of people trying to figure out how to work a rotary phone, for example.
I saw that one. Yeah, that's funny. A couple teenage kids like trying to press, not
What
figuring out how to do it.
And it's the same concept of hiring a salesperson and saying, make 100 phone calls a day and do it every day and follow up with everything else you need to do. And so that's where I'm really steering a lot of organizations to say, rethink that model. Yep. Let these people take a really good inbound transfer or call transfer, and take those leads and convert them well, and do really good and focus them on the sales side of it and getting better at sales rather than how to work a phone.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be a great session. I'm looking forward to it. And you actually have a podcast as well. Yep. And they can check it out at SDP Solutions.com, right?
Yeah. SDP-Solutions.com.
Solutions. And check it out. And you're going to be podcasting at the show, Lead Generation World, as well.
Yeah. The podcast is Lead Management Masterminds. So interviewing people in the space who have been in the world, in our world for a while. I'm starting with a lot of people that have been kind of influential in my career growing up. So I've had one of the founders of Velocify was our first guest, Jeff Solomon, and then Mike Usherman from Jornaya, Ethan Ewing. We just released that earlier this week. So that one's out live now, and we've got a couple really good ones scheduled coming up soon.
Let me ask you if you remember Ethan's podcast that you did with him. Ethan has a platform called ProPair, and it does some distribution type rules, right?
Yeah. Really sophisticated stuff. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. What was sort of your takeaway from what he's sort of doing, just from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that there's lots of great things that they're working on, but the thing I like the most as it relates to lead distribution is that, a lot of lenders today will get a lead and they'll just send it to the next person in line, right? And is that person really the best person for that lead? And what I mean by that is, let's say in Ethan's case, and you listen to the podcast for more details, but essentially, like you would take like a profile of your salespeople and then take a profile of your incoming leads and then try to match them together, so that if someone comes in that's of a certain profile, and it could be loan amounts, could be like property type, could be state that they're in, could be are they a veteran or not. There's a
Hmm.
number of different things that could generate this profile. And when that lead comes in, it's also then given a score, and they try to match those two together when it comes to distribution. And so now, I remember days back when I was a loan officer, when I would get leads in the state of Illinois, I seem to work those a little harder. I might call them a little more often because I was born in Illinois. I go
Yep.
to Illinois every summer. I know, all the different towns in Illinois. And so I can relate to people a lot better. And so it's taking that concept and using that in like real-time distribution, I think is a game changer for organizations not using it and just kind of using the traditional push a lead out. So,
Yeah, I mean, because sales and whatever it is relationship based, right? So
yeah.
if you can connect with somebody on a whole other level, not just skill based, but like you said, location based and geography, whatever it may be, could be really powerful. But then even taking in the loan or the lead filters and all that sort of stuff, who does well with certain types of leads.
Hmm.
I'm sure maybe you tried to do something like that when you were at Nationstar, but probably wasn't quite as easy as plopping in
Yeah,
ProPair.
definitely wasn't easy. And, we try to use lead score, and lead score is still, there's some
Yeah,
functionality in Velocify to, use that and how you distribute to different tiers, but never to the profile side of it, which I think is such an interesting concept as it relates to getting, those leads over. And he has some amazing stats, and definitely would check out his website. I think it's
yeah,
propair.ai, I believe. Yeah. So really,
yeah.
really good stuff.
So talk about you brought up lead scoring for a minute, or you just mentioned it. How's lead scoring being implemented today? I mean, back, I think lead scoring, 10 years ago sort of was the buzzwords of the conference series and all this sort of stuff. And at the time, Targus Info, now Newstar,
Hmm.
and eBureau, I think, and a couple others started to really build out these lead scoring models for proper distribution, I think, or better yet, lead buying, making sure you're getting the right lead into your system.
Hmm.
Are companies still utilizing lead scoring, and how are they utilizing it today to sort of really optimize their lead buys?
Yeah, I see some companies using kind of that external model of a lead score and bringing that in, and then distributing based on that or prioritizing differently. But what I'm recommending to clients as it relates to lead score is you can use that score as it comes in. That's great. That's a great indicator when the lead's new. But what happens when the lead is 3 days old? Is that score still valid or not? And so, using some real time data points to then for the lead score, and I'll give you a really good example that most of my clients are now implementing would be like a customer engagement score, meaning that you're using the last email open date as a scoring indicator, or the last email clicked on, if they clicked on a link in the email and using that, or maybe it's that they've responded to a text message, but using these indicators of engagement of a
Hmm.
higher engagement to then prioritize them higher. Because if someone's clicked on your link on your email, then there's a better chance, in my opinion, that you're going to convert that lead because they're not familiar with your brand, they're familiar with your products, whatever it may be. And so if you can use that score to then reprioritize the lead as it continues down the funnel, right? Not just when it came in new, but 10 days later, 30 days later, it gets really interesting on aged leads and how you follow up and do things there. So yeah, a lot of people are using that. We're using it for distribution. I talked about the call screener model, right? Where
Yeah,
we're calling and they're pressing get lead, the next best lead that's out there. Well, these companies are now able to use this engagement that says it may be the fourth attempt, but I want to call the people who've opened my emails or whatever the case is first, and then I'll call the other people who haven't, and building it that way. I'm now working with companies as well. Let's say you want to call a lead. Velocify said that the best number of calls is, let's say, 6 attempts, right? Let's say you had a lead that you wanted to just call 12 times. So I've seen some lenders calling leads. Let's just for math say 10 times. So I call a lead 10 times. But let's say that by the time I get to the sixth attempt, if the score is below a certain number, should I be wasting additional call attempts on that? Additional time that's 30, 45 seconds, 30, 60 seconds every time I'm calling this lead. Is that really the best use of my time? Probably not if they haven't opened an email and the score was already low to begin with. So what I'm advising lenders to do and people to do is that if you get to the sixth attempt and the score is still low, go ahead and kick it out to nurture now and start doing drip marketing to them from them. Don't waste time on a phone call. But if you get to the sixth attempt and they've opened emails and those types of things, keep
yep.
going an additional number of attempts, and utilize some other things as you get down that we haven't talked about even yet is inquiry time of day. So if you're going to call them 15 days later, call them around the same time of the day that they came into the system, because that's probably when they were available to talk. If they went to the lead provider on, at 12 o'clock on, Wednesday, try to call them around 12 o'clock. It might be their lunch break. Call them at 11:30. So mix it up so you're not just calling at 8 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock
Yeah.
in the morning every single time, to use some of the data then to really drive what you do next.
But that all sounds pretty sophisticated set of rules and if then statements that you have to build into a process. And
Mhm.
we talked a lot about Velocify for obvious reasons. You worked at Velocify for a long time, but is that something that's in that product now where you can say if someone's opened an email
Mhm.
call or or do those types of rules?
Uh, Definitely is available, and I'm working with a number of clients on implementing those things, and I already have a couple that have implemented it.
Wow.
It's not. I would say that it takes some experience, like SDP Solutions, to know how to work the system. There's a lot of some secret, let's call it secret ways to do it, but ultimately, using post and doing a number of different things, we could tell the system to do certain things. So I wouldn't say that there is a product that allows you to go do these things, but there is a way to do it
There's a
and
way
do
to
it in a scalable way.
there's a way to trigger the actions based on some other action.
Correct. Yeah. And the lead
Yeah.
score is already built in. It's a product that's available, so you can utilize that. And the email opens. If you're using Velocify emails, that's all tracked for you. If you're using external systems, third parties, Sofie, whatever it may be, Volley, those are fed back into the system as well and can be used for the score as well.
Yep. So, okay. So maybe we should provide a little bit of perspective here because we've been talking, you've been referencing Velocify, and we did touch on your experience at Nationstar Mortgage, and you were there for 10 years, a little over
Mhm.
10 years, and then went over to Velocify, which is a lead management platform. For those that don't know, it's been around, was Leads 360, is Velocify now, is recently acquired by Ellie Mae.
Mhm.
So tell me about that transition from Nationstar as a buyer to
Yeah.
working for Velocify.
So I again worked there 10 years, and actually 10 years and 1 week to be exact. um, so right after 10 years, but what I found over after implementing Velocify was the thing that I was getting when I would wake up in the morning. The days that I got most excited were the days that I knew I had to go do something inside of Velocify. I just became super passionate about the product, super passionate about all of the cool things that we could kind of do, would help our sales teams. We had some incredible results using the system, and so, I found myself as working for the lender at the time, in a spot where, I really wanted to be in Velocify as much as possible. And the way my career was going, it was less and less in Velocify. And so ultimately, I made the decision to see if Velocify would hire me. And at the time, there wasn't any open positions. But the way that I positioned it with them was that I believed that, excuse me, and at the time, I was the biggest client. By the way, I had almost 1,000 users in the system. And so, and I had felt that Velocify could do a better job at the time of educating their customers and making sure that the customers were following best practices. A lot of it was me just kind of figuring out how to do it. And so ultimately, I positioned it with Velocify that they should consider hiring somebody that goes out to their customers and makes them, better, uses the best practices and implement different things. And at the time, there obviously wasn't anybody to do that. So I said, you guys should hire somebody. And they said, that's great. We would love to hire somebody to do that. It's a great idea. We've talked about doing that. Problem is we don't know someone who knows the system well enough to do that. And I was like, hey, I know a guy,
Right.
hire me. And so, long story short, I came into a position, they created a position. It was a business consultant under professional services, essentially. And they pretty much said, here's the company credit card. Go travel, go spend time with our clients, go make them better. And for an entire year, I traveled 100,000 miles on American Airlines. I was on the road 50 out of the 52 weeks at some
It's
point during the
crazy.
week,
Yeah.
and just went around and built some really good relationships and really spent time, invested time to make Velocify customers better. Did that for a year. And then ultimately they said, hey, we would love for you to move into like an enterprise account manager role where you go out and spend time with our biggest customers and spend time on utilizing the same things you're doing now, making people better, but just go focus on these 30 accounts. And so I hit the road again, 100,000 miles on the road all the time with our clients, and really helping them optimize the system around their business. Everyone's a little different. Everyone needs a little bit more, different things here and there. And so really spent some time and absolutely loved doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. You said they're all sort of different, but I bet the problems that you kind of came across were all sort of very similar as
Sure.
well. What was sort of if you had to go to 10 clients, you knew they're going to have this problem. What
Yeah.
was it?
I mean, it was always user adoption. That was always a critical piece of, and if you listen to my podcast, it's a question I ask everybody about, what are some of your techniques for user adoption? It's such a critical piece because you can implement the best technology in the world. It
Right.
can solve all the world's problems, but if it requires somebody to use it, you're going to struggle unless you have really good training, really good retraining, really good lunch. And like we had at Nationstar, I had a lunch and learn series. I'd come in and I'd buy lunch for the sales team, and they would come in and I would kind of reteach them things or show them new ideas. I had a SWAT team that were like my top salespeople. They were like my advisory board. So if I was implementing something new and something, a new process, new strategy, I would bring them in and run it by them and get their feedback and maybe make some tweaks based on their feedback. So that when I went out and implemented it, I could say, hey, it wasn't just me that came up with this. I met with the top people in the company, top salespeople, and here's what we came up with as a team. And now that we're implementing, so people would buy in and adopt to those types of things much quicker than before. And so, yeah, I mean, user adoption across the board, getting people to make the phone calls. I think the call screener model now comes into place, right? Because now it's less about this 100 salespeople doing something. You can control 10 screeners better than you can 100 people trying to use the prioritization and use these things. So it's constantly training, constantly showing them data, constantly showing them white papers, and sharing with them kind of the case studies, so they really understand the impact it have on their business, as it comes to closing more loans.
Yeah. I have a question for you regarding best practices around number of calls. And I know, you've talked about a really more dynamic approach versus just going, okay, we're going to call this lead 10 times or 12
Mm-hmm.
times. And, but taking into account those statements, one of the things I was talking with somebody the other day, in the mortgage industry, and they're like, man, it's really hard to compete sometimes against these bigger brands. They're calling the leads hundreds and hundreds of times. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy. He went on to say he put in a test lead in, and he was a lead and went to one of these big brands, and he received, I quote, 500 calls. Now, I don't know if that's accurate. I hope it's not. I
Sure.
hope it's not. I hope it's much, much less than that. But the question was, was around, best practices around how many dials first of all, are some of these companies really calling, leads that many times, and making hundreds of attempts out there for the sake of making attempts?
I've seen it. Yeah. I did a customer experience screening in an organization called a lead 33 times in the first 2.5 days, 3 days.
That's insanity.
It is. And
Crazy.
so, but that's what, other people are doing. They feel like they need to do that, on certain lead sources. And
It can't
so
be good. That can't be good. And it's got to be pissing people off enough to not even want to do business with them.
I
Although,
agree.
although I'm sure they're calling and hanging up, and they're not leaving their message and not being a brand, and they're probably calling from multiple different phone numbers too. But still, I mean, talk about how you get prospects angry with the lead generation process.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Well, so, I mean, maybe it's not number of attempts. It's really about being smart about your attempts, right? Obviously speed is critical. First one to call, and there's technology out there that is really hard to beat. Some of these lenders have built. So if you
hmm
can't do that, I recommend maybe rethinking your process. Does it make sense to buy a bunch of leads on Monday morning when everyone else buys leads? Right. Or maybe you could buy the after hour leads that no one wants, or
yeah,
the
great
weekend leads.
point.
And so what I'm implementing with a number of clients today is strategies around how to follow up with weekend leads, because leads that come in on Saturday and are called on Saturday convert 10% higher than on any other day. Right.
Yep.
And on Sunday, that even goes up further, because no one has salespeople calling their leads on Saturdays and Sundays much anymore. And so if you can take advantage of those types of experiences, if you're running against these brands that you're struggling against, do what they're not doing, which is calling on the weekend, for example. Or another client of mine, they have people in the central time zone, but they allow them to work from home. So they have their cell phones or whatever the case is. So if a California lead comes in, let's say at 10:45 Central Time, it's 8:45 California time, you can still call them. No one else is calling them in the central time zone except for now this company, because now they're shotgunning that call to that loan officer or series of loan officers' cell phones, and the first person to pick up wins. They press one, the call goes out to the customer at 8:45 California time, and it's 10:45 their time. They're sitting on the couch watching TV with their wife,
Yeah.
but they're
Well,
able to take that
even
call.
if it's a call where it's like, hey, I just want to let you know I got your message. I know it's 8:45 in California. You probably don't really want to maybe have time to go over. If you do, we can do it. But if not, let's schedule a time tomorrow and have that call. I guess would probably work
Yeah,
too. Better than not reaching out to it all, I'd imagine.
waiting till the morning. Yeah, and so you
Right.
can set the expectation of, or just set up front, like, you're very important to me, customer. It was 8:45. It's 10:45 my time. But you know what? I wanted to make sure that I called you right away, because tomorrow your phone's gonna go crazy. You're gonna get
Yeah.
tons of phone calls. But just remember, I'm the only one who called you at 10:45, or 10:45 my time. And although I can't take a full application now, I can at least have that quick conversation, quick rapport build with that customer,
Yeah.
and even give them a heads up that their phone's going to blow up and they should be prepared. But
Yeah.
remember who it was that called you first.
Yeah. And that's, it's funny with the weekends too. One of the things that we looked at when this was 10 plus years ago, buying leads, but was when are the leads, what day of the week did leads
Mm-hmm.
close at the highest rate? And absolutely, it was weekends. Of course, Saturdays, Sundays were amazing. Mondays seemed to be the worst. And I think that's probably a couple different factors. One is that there'd be sometimes an overflow of leads from the weekend, and then the sales guys were overloaded Monday trying to catch up, doing all this sort of stuff. Not only that, consumers are doing the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
working Monday and not available. And I mean, I almost, I suggest maybe we don't even buy any leads on Mondays, or even work on outbound sales on new stuff on Mondays, and just sort of make it all through the week, and then on the
Mm-hmm.
weekend on a Saturday or Sunday. Because those guys that would come in on the Saturday and Sundays, boy, they would do quite well, because there would still be leads coming in.
Yeah. Well, I would say one of my clients I work with today, they have a loan officer who only works on Saturdays and Sundays,
Yeah,
and he makes a killing. Only
yeah,
works on Saturday. Only takes new leads on Saturday and Sundays. Now he works during the week to follow up on
sure,
his pipeline and do those types of things,
yep,
but he's only taking new leads on Saturdays and Sundays all day long, and he makes a living off of that. It just, and kills it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so there's days of the week, there's timing and all that sort of stuff. Do you find that buyers are, because I gotta imagine it's hard unless you have a lot of buying power as a lead buyer or mortgage company to say, hey, um, lead point
Mm-hmm.
or rate marketplace, or what Suda Connect, or whoever it may be. I only want to get leads from X time to this time on this day and this day. Are you finding that lead sellers are a little bit more amenable to those types of filters, or it's still pretty hard to get that kind of control?
I mean, from what I've ran across, they're a little more lenient on that, because they have a difficult time selling sometimes the weekend leads, right?
Right.
People kind of shut
So
it off on
crazy.
Friday and turn back
Yeah.
on Monday. So, the weekends are a little easier to have that conversation with, and maybe you start there and show some success, and buy more because you're having great success. And then maybe you can start, experimenting with some of the other stuff that you would want from the lead provider there.
Yeah. On that note, what sort of, when we talk about lead buyer and lead seller relationships, I mean, one of the biggest things is sort of transparency and providing feedback, back and forth. Are there any other things that you can, from your experience with dealing with vendors and all that sort of stuff, would recommend or provide to a buyer? Say, hey, keep them. These are sort of the things you need to do to have a good relationship with the lead seller and get the most from them. Um,
Yeah, I would say that I'm working with, or in the final stages of finalizing a deal with a lead provider where we're going to provide to their customers a customer experience screening in certain cases. So this will help the customer not only really understand how they are calling, emailing, and texting these types of leads from this lead provider, but now, they can, this lead provider can work with SDP to offer solutions that would help them improve those their processes they may have around, if they're having trouble, we find that they're having trouble with speed to lead. Let's go tackle that and see how we can help you improve there. If you're having trouble with callbacks, those types of things, to really provide a little deeper relationship, not just here's the leads, here's the invoice, it's due the end of the month. It's, hey, here's the leads and here's some data that we've done and time and effort spent into really understanding how to make you better, the lender. That will ultimately, and the lead provider knows that will eventually drive more business back to them, because now they're going to have someone converting leads at a higher rate on their leads and potentially buying more.
Absolutely. I mean, that is congratulations on hopefully getting that through. Because, but from the seller side, that is huge. I've been able to be on both sides of the table as a buyer, and then ran marketing for a lead generation company for a number of years. And it's funny, you get the calls, and as the one running marketing, the sales guys are like, let's get Mike on the phone and explain why
Mm-hmm.
this guy's complaining about lead quality or the issues. And one of the first questions is, okay, tell me a little bit about your process. First, we've already looked into the lead, and here's what we found. But also tell us what you're doing. And then there's multiple times where people go, okay, so what do you do when you get a lead? I send an email. Okay, I wait for them to call me back. you know
It's
and you're
crazy.
like, and you're complaining about the lead quality.
Yep.
So the real disconnect between expectations of what you're supposed to do when you get a lead. And listen, these guys are investing a lot of money into leads,
Yeah.
anywhere between 10 and 30, $40 per lead. You want to have your process buttoned up. And so for the lead seller, I'm sure he's going to love the fact that there's some sort of pre-screen. Hey, are you an actually qualified lead buyer? Meaning you're actually doing all you can to really
Yeah.
close the deals.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like I said, I've done over 300 of these. I did these for my clients on a consistent basis when I was an account manager, and I did it prior as a business consultant. I'm now doing quite a few of them through SDP. So I have clients of mine who says, like, hey, we're good on the implementation stuff. Like
Yeah.
we've got people, we're good, but really how we think you could help us is to secret shop us every quarter. Put a lead in, give us the results, give us some recommendations, we'll take it from there. And I'm doing that simply for a number of clients. When I do an assessment before I go on site to really understand the process, I'm putting a lead in and I'm tracking it for 2 weeks, seeing what happens, so that when I walk in the door, I have with me, here's your current experience, here's what we need to fix. And I already understand kind of their setup, rather than tell me about how your strategy is. Like I can actually see it on paper, on an actual lead experience. And from a I just think it was such a critical piece of what I did from an account management perspective, because they were using Velocify to make phone calls, emails, and text. And here I was walking in the door and saying, okay, here's the issues, right? It's like a doctor coming in with, they've done a diagnosis. Here's exactly what I think is wrong. We're going to go attack this first, rather than walking in and saying, oh, tell me a little bit more about where it hurts, and doing this whole full blown
Yeah.
thing then. But to walk in the door with results, it was so critical during my time. And like I said, I've done almost 300 of these now. I think I'm on like 292. I've written out articles on it. I have
Yeah.
another article coming out on like the top 5 things I've learned from doing 200 of these. Number one thing is call screeners, believe it or not. I mean, we've
Yeah.
talked about a lot about that. But it's just a critical piece of my business. It's something I do, and I'm super excited to partner with lead providers. And if you have any lead providers out there who would like to learn more about it, would love to show them a little bit more about the
Yeah.
strategy.
Well, what would be cool is, you remember when Lending Tree used to do, and I'll let you go. I know we got to end this call here pretty quick, but when Lending Tree used to do the per closed loan fee,
Hmm.
so you'd pay a lead cost up front, but then you'd also, if you close the loan, you'd also pay a portion of that to Lending Tree.
Right.
And then they would basically score their lead buyers based on their success. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously it is mutually beneficial for both of them to have to the leads to go to the most successful people.
Yep.
So they would do that, and then obviously they, with different rules in place, they could no longer do the closed loan fees.
Right.
But taking that same concept from a lead seller standpoint and evaluating your network of buyers and actually giving them scores based on how successful they are with their process and their closings,
Yeah.
and then maybe even giving them a discount or basic priority on leads so that the good leads or the leads are going to the guys that are closing the worst, and the ones that are not doing well are getting less volume. And so there's almost like a competitive nature. And yeah, if you really want more of these great leads, your process has to, your score, your SDP score has to go up.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want to get this discount, your SDP score needs to be 90 or higher.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, lead sellers are trying to do a couple different things. Obviously, they're trying to make money, but they're trying to get good conversions for their lead buyers. And two and three, they're really trying to help the consumer
Yep.
find the right and match the right people and get deals done. They're the middleman between getting people inquiries and getting sales closed. And so the more they could do that, the better. And they feel good about being successful. So it'd be interesting to see, like have an SDP score in there that
Yeah.
sort of drove where leads would even go to a buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. And closed loans one thing, but if the experience the customer had up
Yeah.
until that point was terrible, maybe they ultimately got lucky and closed the loan. But if they, if you can show that they're doing the right things, they're, right strategies are in place to really drive. Because again, I maybe didn't make it clear. I'm not answering my phone. I'm putting a lead in and I let it sit for 10 days, right?
Yeah.
And I'm watching what they do, and then I call back in after 10 days, ask for a call back the day later, and see what happens for another 10 days. And so, there's this, because we could get all the way, have a great experience up to contact. And then like what I
Right.
typically find, people don't call me back.
Yep.
If you're finding that, if your buyers are doing that with the leads you're providing them, and kind of dropping these customers off, to your point, maybe it's a lower score for the priority of leads they get in the future. Yeah, I love
or
it.
even calling the leads hundreds of times or 30 sometimes within a day. That's going to drive, because that's not a good customer experience. It's just not.
Absolutely.
And as a lead generator, I don't want customers going out there, oh man, that Mike Free website I went to get rates on blew my phone up, and I'm going to go to the BBB and I'm going to report it because I didn't expect to get all these calls. And now I've got them looking at CFPB, looking at me. I've got you're just opening up a can of worms when a consumer starts to complain about how many times they've been contacted.
Yep.
So yeah, really cool idea.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to do too.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, thanks for doing this again.
Yeah.
I apologize for making you do it twice.
All good.
But
good practice.
But it was fun. So if people want to get a hold of you, I'll have it up on the screen here in just a moment. But it's stp solutions.com, right?
There you go. Yeah. SDP.
Did I say STP? Some Stone Temple Pilots.
Yeah, that's what I always think of too when I see it. But
SDP,
SDP-solutions.com. My podcasts are on there. I've got my blog post on there as well. Lots of great articles, or I think they're great so far. But yeah, check it out, and drop me a line and let me know if I can help at all.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you at Lead Generation World.
Can't wait. See you in Denver soon.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks.